Okay. I wonder how close should I be to this microphone? All right, so we're gonna start in, I don't know, 30 seconds because there are still people entering the room. There are some seats in the front, like 2, 3, 4, 6 seats in the front at least. And there are 2 there still available. Okay, so I'm gonna start now. Hi everyone, happy to be here with you. Today I'll talk about CKEditor 5 in Drupal 9 and 10 and about some things that you probably never heard about CKEditor. I hope to inspire you to squeeze the most out of CKEditor 5 in Drupal projects with this presentation. About myself, I'm working for CKSource since 2007. CKSource is the company that makes CKEditor. We are located in Poland, have currently like over 80 people on board. I started as a developer. In the past, I was also the maintainer of the CKEditor module for Drupal 6 and 7. Currently, I am the president and CPO of CKSource. So today I will cover several topics. How CKEditor 5 ended up in Drupal. I will give you some overview of CKEditor 5, including presenting some of the features that are not included by default in Drupal, but that you can try to add. And at the end, I will go through a sample plugin that was built to showcase you how to extend CKEditor 5 with your own features. But before we start, let me show you a couple of screenshots of CKEditor 5 to stimulate your imagination. So that's the stock CKEditor 5 in Drupal. It recently had a refreshed interface, so the background is white. This is also the stock CKEditor 5 in Drupal, this time with a little bit more features. This is CKEditor 5 with a customized theme, thanks to CSS variables. This is CKEditor with the restricted editing functionality, allowing you to create only... Oopsie. That's funny.
It's restricted, we couldn't see it.
Super restricted editing. I have to be very gentle. This adapter is really sensitive. Okay, so I'll try to change the slide with my eyes, maybe. This is yeah, CKEditor with restricted editing functionality, so you can create only certain parts editable in CKEditor 5. Here you can see some fancy feature called pagination that lets you see in the editor how the content will be split into pages in created PDF files that you can create with CKEditor 5 too. CKEditor 5 can be enhanced with spell checker, grammar checker, and intelligent text predictions. This is also CKEditor 5. Here you can see track changes. So basically, instead of making changes in the document, you can add suggestions to remove, add content, etc. There's more sophisticated revision history where you can compare even several revisions at once. This is CKEditor with real-time collaboration where multiple people can edit the document simultaneously. This is the cake edition of CKEditor 5. Yes, so I'm showing those examples to you to underline that CKEditor is really flexible. The default Drupal integration is great already, but doesn't have to limit you in any way. Because thanks to CKEditor API and Drupal API, you can extend it further with features. So, a couple of slides about how it happened that actually CKEditor 5 ended up in Drupal 9 and Drupal 10. As most of you know, CKEditor 4 is the default WYSIWYG editor in Drupal 8 and Drupal 9. It has been added to the Drupal core years ago, like, I don't know, 12 years ago or something like that, or 10 years ago. Unfortunately, as every software is slowly reaching its end of life next year. So, because of the upcoming end of support for CKEditor 4, Drupal had to choose another WYSIWYG editor to replace CKEditor 4 in Drupal 10. There was a little bit of brainstorming about which editor to choose, but CKEditor 5 has been selected as the successor and will become the default editor in Drupal 10. There are multiple reasons why this has happened. CKEditor 5 is a really good editor, but most importantly, we had a good track of previous collaboration with the Drupal team. The next slide will show this a bit. On the next slides, we'll show the number of tickets that both Drupal core team, Drupal community, and CKEditor team had to close to ship CKEditor 5 in Drupal. I'm not sure if that's a good recommendation for CKEditor 5 in general, how many tickets it took, but just have a look at this. So it starts here, and we go through tickets, even some more tickets, and tickets, lots of them. Plenty of tickets to ship, just so is CKEditor, and tickets. And the list stops here. So that was the 10 seconds time lapse of 2 years of people's life. Yeah, so it took over 2 years to complete all the work required to seamlessly integrate CKEditor 5 with Drupal and guarantee desired developer and user experience. And taking this opportunity, I would like to thank everyone who was engaged in this process, especially to Benjamin Millins, Lori Escola, Wim Leaders, and Peter Weber, and really big kudos to them. And I would like also to thank all the other people involved. Thank you, everyone. Really, this list actually is not does not contain all the nicknames of people that help with that. Okay, so on the CK source side, we introduced some features in CKEditor 5 internally to satisfy Drupal requirements. And we had to focus, among other things, on several things, such as general HTML support. Because believe me or not, but the initial version of CKEditor 5 was actually very strict in terms of HTML elements and tags that it supported out of the box. Basically, the first version of CKEditor 5, I mean the first and a couple of other releases, were just supporting elements and attributes that were only supported by CKEditor 5 plugins. So if there was an HTML markup that didn't follow this rule, it was simply removed by CKEditor 5. So we had to introduce, yes, I have to speak closer to the microphone. We had to introduce so-called general HTML support, where through just the definition, you can actually define what elements, additional elements, attributes, and styles CKEditor 5 should support. And this took a while, but thanks to that, you may be sure that if you port your content from CKEditor 4 to CKEditor 5, from Drupal 9 to Drupal 10, the content will be preserved. Yeah. Another thing that we had to introduce, and this is just like an internal thing, but basically, unlike typical JavaScript applications, Drupal has a requirement to be able to ship an extensions for CKEditor through contrib modules. So we had to invent, let's say, a mechanism to be able to attach plugins to CKEditor. And because CKEditor 5 is, let's say, a modern JavaScript application, typically you just, bundle all the JavaScript and, finish with a bundle that cannot be actually extended, etc. But here Webpack DLLs were handy. And we added some additional functionalities that were not available in CKEditor 5, but for, let's say, feature priority, etc., we introduced them. So styles dropdown and document lists. Document lists were particularly funny because this is the thing that you actually probably don't notice at all when you work on it. Basically, this is a functionality to be able to have a block image inside a list item or a heading inside a list item. And it took us like months of development to ship that particular thing. Yeah, so one other thing that I wanted to mention before we move forward, don't be fooled by the numbers next to the name of the editor. CKEditor 5 is not a continuation of CKEditor 4. It has been rewritten from scratch. So as a Drupal community, you maybe remember the situation with Drupal 7, Drupal 8, and the migration. So that's the case here, yay. So it is a completely new editor with a different architecture and APIs. Rewriting the editor was a hard decision, but we doubted we will not be able to introduce all the changes we wanted. Basically, there was no easy way to make some transitions from transition from CKEditor 4 to CKEditor 5 to enable the functionalities that we wanted to introduce, like track changes, real-time collaboration, and so on. So, as a consequence of this switch, any contrib plugins for CKEditor 4 have to be recreated to work with CKEditor 5. Yay. Side note, writing so complex software from scratch is an incredible challenge, and we will think twice before we try it again. So basically, we started the CKEditor 5 development like 8 years ago, and we still are adding features to it. So really, it looks simple at first glance, but it's complex and like really time-consuming to produce something like that. So let's have now a closer look at CKEditor 5 in Drupal. CKEditor 5 was added into the core in Drupal 9.3 as an experimental module. And starting from 9.5, CKEditor 5 is no longer experimental, and CKEditor 4 is deprecated. It shows the confidence of the Drupal core team into the effort that has been already made, and we actually support it. So basically, to try out CKEditor 5, you don't have to wait until Drupal 10 is officially available. You can even try it out in Drupal 9 too. So the process of enabling CKEditor 5 was a little bit different in previous version of Drupal. It was marked as an experimental module. And starting from Drupal 9.5, it's no longer experimental, it's stable, but instead the previous CKEditor version was marked as deprecated, just to notify unaware people that it's going to be sunsetted next year. So once you enable CKEditor 5 module, you have to, if you're on Drupal 9, you have to switch the editor, text editor, in text editor, text formats configuration to CKEditor 5. And once you do this, you'll have like a new toolbar configurator with new buttons and some warnings. So that's the new CKEditor 5 in Drupal. Okay, so in Drupal 10, CKEditor 5 will be the default, the only WYSIWYG editor available in the core of Drupal. That's because of CKEditor 4 not being supported anymore. Drupal 10, according to my knowledge, is going to be released in December this year, so we all still have some time. However, we encourage you to give CKEditor 5 a try, especially if you are looking to improve the editing experience of your users. A little bit about the data retention. I already mentioned this. The Drupal core team did everything that was possible to keep your data safe, and so we do. And once Drupal 10 is officially released, there should be no data loss when your content from CKEditor 4 will be loaded into CKEditor 5 after the upgrade. Even if it turns out that some features are missing in CKEditor 5, the goal is at least to keep your data in place. So remember what I said about general HTML support, that it provides support for everything, basically. A bit different story is when it comes to all the modules that we're extending or interacting with CKEditor 4. Since CKEditor 5 is completely different software, all these modules need to add dedicated support for CKEditor 5. If you're using some less popular modules for CKEditor, or you have developed your own, you have to make sure it's ready for the new editor. There's actually a helpful documentation page that may help you understand what's the status of some CKEditor related modules and how to test the upgrade path, etc. So now let me go quickly through some new enhancements added to CKEditor 5 in Drupal. First of all, the new editor comes with a new, better UI and improved user interface. So, for example, media widgets have now a dedicated balloon toolbar attached, allowing users to quickly adjust embed media. You can define captions directly in the editor. Links have now a balloon panel attached to it, allowing users to quickly see the link URL to manage it. The styles dropdown has been reworked to let you present nicely how each specific style will look like. I was having some hard time to configure it in Drupal, so make sure to try it out and report any errors you find. We introduced some productivity enhancements, such as auto formatting, where you can use the markdown similar to markdown, markup similar to markdown, within the editor to make lists or quickly format the text. So for instance, if you start with 2 stars, type some text, it will become bold. So simple but useful feature, and in fact it supports lots of markup like lists, to-do lists, headings, code blocks, etc. The one small issue is that it's not yet available in Drupal, but it's in progress, and I know that there is an intention to have it shipped in Drupal too. So right now we can test it in CKEditor documentation, for example, but it should land soon in Drupal too. Another similar functionality are transformations. So in this simple example, we will surround C with parentheses to convert it to a copyright sign automatically. So something like that. And you can actually configure those transformations to add, similar transformations in CKEditor. This is actually not shipped in Drupal, but if it looks interesting to you, you can always fill an issue and count on that it will land soon there. I mean, sooner or later. One more thing. There's one additional thing that I wanted to showcase to you. Basically, it's something that doesn't make a wow effect. It's just a source mode. But if you are more familiar with how the development of CKEditor 5 was going over the last years, we were actually quite unhappy with adding support for source elements. For quite some time, we thought that that's not the way how you should propose rich text editing, that basically you should, propose a decent UI for that. You shouldn't expect from your users to know HTML, etc. And guess what? We had so many people looking for it that we had to give up, and we introduced it. And it's typical that on some websites there are power users that actually want to use HTML, that want to, enter manually some sophisticated HTML, which isn't supported through the UI. So we basically introduced it. So we have source mode again. Right now I would like to show you a couple of ideas for simple contrib modules that you may create for Drupal utilizing already existing features of CKEditor 5. And they're not shipped with the core library, but you are free to make contrib modules. By the way, just my 2 cents. Contrib modules are a good way, in my opinion, to sell your skills. We are looking actively for a good developer to help us with Drupal module development. And one of the things that I look personally at is the public profile on Drupal.org. So if you're a Drupal developer, make sure to do something for the community. It will help yourself too. Okay, so first plugin not available in Drupal, but probably easy to ship it, is the word characters count. Basically, we expose the API, and you are free to propose it in any way you like in the UI. Second thing are mentions. They may even have more sense paired with some custom notification system, for example, to notify people when they are mentioned in a document or something. And perhaps also with to-do list items. Things that probably some of you know from CKEditor 4. There was quite a popular module for CKEditor 4. This is also available, like setting font family, size, color, background color. It's available for CKEditor 5 too. Same as find and replace. So basically, if something is not available in Drupal out of the box and you like it, you can always add it by writing a module or checking if someone already did that. Another category of plugins that are not included in Drupal, that should work. Another category of plugins that are not included in Drupal are the premium features. As you know, CKEditor 5 is an open source editor. Anyone can use it for free under the GPL license. At the same time, in order to have a team working full-time on an editor, we need to have funds to run the whole thing. So that's our solution for this problem. We just have some additional paid features that anyone can additionally purchase to CKEditor 5. And just, like 2 minutes why actually funding is required. That's the story of Aloha Editor. Basically, they had a really high chance to be included in Drupal 8. And, somehow it happened that we were selected to Drupal 8. But the story is that Drupal 8 was released publicly in 2015. And the same year, Aloha stopped being maintained actively. They just were minimally maintained with like a 3 years break in 2019. And for a project like Drupal, it's really important to have stable dependencies. And we as a product company also understand how it's important to have stable dependencies, because you don't want to ship your product with a dependency that you will have to maintain a year later by yourself. Another example of dying projects is Quill.js. So it actually is kind of dead since 2019. And as you know, projects without proper support are a major threat for everyone. There are some security issues hanging on GitHub issue tracker. I haven't verified them, but nobody's taking care of them. Another fun stat is that from 8 supported editors by Drupal 7 WYSIWYG module, only 2 survived until today. Okay, so enough about that editors. Here are some of the premium features I would like to quickly showcase before we move on to another part. So export to PDF. With proper configuration, you can actually achieve some document layout. I mean, the same document layout I've seen in CKEditor. So that was CKEditor, that's the PDF file, yay. Export to Word, similar functionality as export to PDF, but this time creating docx files with comments and suggestions supported. Talking about comments, there's support for comments in CKEditor 5. There is support for track changes, so adding suggestions in the document, revision history. What I particularly like in this functionality are the up-down arrows on top that will let you quickly browse through the changes in the document, especially useful if you have like super long documents for some reason. And real-time collaboration. So basically, if you like, you can change your CKEditor 5 into a Google Docs-like editor. I actually found out that some people are using Drupal and Google Docs together to collaborate in Google Docs and later paste the content into Drupal. So if you would like to use a single application, you can do so. And you have full control over where the data is located, and so on. So we are working on a dedicated module that integrates those functionalities. I was actually hoping that we're gonna have a release today, but yes, we have. Okay, so yay, it has been released. So you have a chance of being super early adopters, probably misleading documentation and some issues. If you are eager to try it out, go ahead. It's marked as 1.00 beta, and some of the modules are marked as experimental, but I encourage you to give it a try if you like and report issues, because we probably are not aware of some issues. Yeah. So here is a sneak peek of the module. So CKEditor with real-time collaboration commands, track changes directly in Drupal. It works in Drupal 9.4 plus and 10, alpha, beta, whatever, alpha 7 and beta 1. Yeah, this is the same article, but you know, we don't have a lot of space for the editor by default. I have no idea how to fix it, so we have this collapsible sidebar to gain at least a little bit more space, and we have some proof of concept of maximize plugin, let's say, that expands the editor to the whole viewport, let's say. And the revision history is also integrated with Drupal. It's a little bit different than the default Drupal revision history, because it is accessible actually from the editor itself, and it's more granular than the Drupal revision history. Yeah, so just play with it and you'll understand the differences. Export to Word is also integrated with Drupal. Here you see the same content, but exported to Word with suggestions and comments included. Okay, so let me check the time. Yeah, we'll have like half an hour for questions. So let me change the topic now and talk a bit about widgets. Similarly to CKEditor 4, you can use widgets in your plugins to place various objects inside CKEditor. For instance, more complex structures, product cards, external libraries like charts, math formulas, or whatever you imagine. So to put this in really simple terms, a widget is just an element inside the editor that has this little highlight border. The arrows in top left and bottom right are to actually make it simpler to add paragraphs at the top and at the bottom of the widget. And it can have some additional toolbars attached to it. So a good example of a widget is this image element or a table. Oops, sorry. Or this widget to insert diagrams using the mermaid syntax. There are other brilliant widgets that you can create by yourself. It's just to inspire you. By the way, in case of you are wondering what you see here, you're correct. That's actually a screenshot from GitHub, where we replaced the default Markdown editor with CKEditor. And we made this mermaid widget when we noticed that it's supported by GitHub. Yeah, so that's our editor in action. So you can actually download it if you like. We just wanted to, I don't know, there is this saying like eat your own dog food or something like that. So we just wanted to try out CKEditor in action all the time and deal with all the issues we have. Yeah, so it's available for Google Chrome and Firefox. Yes, changes this thing into the other thing. There's one thing that I actually appreciate the most in this extension is that basically it has support for tables. I cannot sometimes even remember how to make links and so on in Markdown. So, and for sure I don't remember how to make tables in GitHub. So it's useful for me at least. Okay, so I will use the GitHub writer to explain one more thing about CKEditor 5. So now we, let's say, change the part of this presentation to the more technical one. So how is it actually possible that we injected CKEditor 5 into GitHub? Since GitHub is actually operating on Markdown. So that's because of the architecture of CKEditor 5. So basically, if you input HTML to CKEditor 5, it goes through HTML data processor to convert it into a model, which is an abstract presentation of the data. And the same if you ask CKEditor 5 to return the data, it goes through the, let's say, data processor, let's say, to output HTML. So we replaced that HTML data processor to Markdown data processor. And that's it. So, but this should give you like an understanding what's possible, because in theory, we could replace the Markdown processor with JSON data processor. So perhaps someday we'll introduce some, I don't know, more block-based oriented variation of CKEditor 5 next to classic HTML that outputs something like JSON instead. If you'll be interested in something like that, just feel free to reach out to us, because we would like to actually understand how to propose such an editor. Yeah. So, in the last part of this presentation, I will quickly introduce you to the CKEditor 5 plugins development. Let me check something. Okay, so anyway, yeah, let's switch to the plugins development. I was sure that I have a warning here in the presentation, but I can't find it. Basically, my expectation is not that I will teach you how to write plugins in like 10 minutes. It's more like to inspire you. And there is a sample plugin available on GitHub. You can go back to this presentation to get a taste of it, but it's impossible to learn this so fast. At least I'm not able to. Okay, so before we switch on to that plugin development, I just wanted to say one more thing about Webpack DLLs. I will actually probably repeat myself. So basically, CKEditor 5 uses some modern ES6 JavaScript, so it's being bundled with all the features you need in the ahead-of-time build process. So this wasn't suitable for Drupal, where plugins should be added actually dynamically through contrib modules. So we had to, ship this Webpack DLL support, and I'm not able to explain what they do inside. So basically, it's about placing one magic file with the DLL handling code for Webpack configuration, and it magically will make it happen that your imports between dynamically added files that they will work. So you don't have to understand it, just like me. We have like a special DevOps team that handles that, and we just consume what they do. Yeah. So in the sample plugin, you will find like the part of code that you have to use to give support for Webpack DLLs. And you can do it this way, or you can actually use our CKEditor 5 package generator. that is actually producing a nice plugin out of the box with things like there's like some simple code that shows how to write a plugin. Basically, there's a code of a plugin that defines a button and does something. There are tests already included. There is a code to actually create a DLL out of this sample plugin. So basically, I encourage you to give it a try. It saves a lot of time. There's live reload also available and so on. Okay, so let's see this whole module plugin development in action. We'll create a sample module that will add 2 columns layout in CKEditor. So this is an example of a widget. Again, you see this like additional features around this widget. And remember that widgets can do really magic things. So for example, we can restrict what HTML is supported inside widgets. So if you'd like to have a widget with something like title with that just supports text or just basic formatting, that's possible too. Here we just define 2 columns layout. The source code is available on GitHub, and this is like a nice example of open source cooperation. It was based on previous attempts by Peter Weber and Laurie Escola. I just copied it and fine-tuned and added some comments. So please study the code later if you'd like to. So a little bit about how it's structured. Know that there is no PHP required to ship a module that provides a CKEditor 5 plugin. There's just a Webpack configuration file and some YAM files and some JavaScript files. So in the Webpack configuration that I never understand, there is some like definition of an output file, library name, etc. So basically things that I never remember, but they have to be there. There is a noun script that actually builds the DLL. This is if you copy the sample plugin that's available on GitHub. But if you use our plugin generator, it will actually provide you a little bit more features like building the DLL, live reload, linter, tests, etc. So that's why I'm actually recommending it. Yeah, so about the YAM files required for the plugin, the info YAM file is just a standard module. Standard description with some dependencies. The CKEditor 5 YAML is more interesting. It describes the plugin that we create. For example, at the bottom you see the elements that it introduces, a little bit above the toolbar item that it introduces, and so on. And the libraries one, it just like defines which assets to load with the extension for both admin and the front end. So that was the Drupal part. Now the CKEditor 5 part. Let's start from the simpler things. So basically, the plugin will consist of, let's say, 4 parts. CKEditor 5 is in general much more decoupled than CKEditor 4. An anecdote: to enforce ourselves to have a really decoupled architecture, at some point we ended up with like 100 repositories for every single plugin. It was super useful when we actually had to, update the copyrights with the new year or have pull requests that, were touching like several plugins. So to solve that problem, we have to write our own tool to deal with that. So after dealing with that for a long while, we ended up with a mono repo back because we spent so much time on it. And yeah, so going back to the reality, we have to define the UI. We have to create a comment that will insert those 2 columns into the editor. We'll connect this comment with the UI so that this comment was executed when the UI is, when the button is pressed in the UI. We have to define the schema, which actually tells the editor where these 2 columns can be inserted and where not. And we'll define converters that I will explain soon. So basically 4 concepts that you have to understand. Don't worry, we have it explained in our documentation. Yes, and if you will not be able to understand it after the first reading, don't worry, it's just complex. Yeah, so these are all the files that we need to create. The command one, the main plugin file that loads the rest of files, editing file where we define schema and converters, and the UI file. In theory, you could place it into a single file. That's just to showcase more or less how those things are split in CKEditor. So the main file has just a bit of code. It simply loads the editing part and the UI part. The UI is pretty simple. So we create the button there, and we ask the button to actually the editor to listen to the execute event of this button, and if that happens, the insert two columns command is executed, and that's basically all. So changing the topic for a while, the main difference between CKEditor 4 and CKEditor 5 is that CKEditor 5 operates on its own document model. We love abstraction. It actually was supposed to help us a lot with dealing with changes in the document, and it actually helped a lot implementing things like track changes or real-time collaboration was much easier thanks to that. So in our case, we will create two model elements, two columns and columns that will have their own representation in the view, let's say. So the representation is pretty typical. We have like section and some divs, but in the model, this is like much simpler. So a little bit more about the model, just to give you a better feeling of this part. So on top you have like this, the content, and at the bottom you have the representation in the model. So we see that the headings are, let's say, typical paragraphs too, but at the same time you see that inline elements are actually just attributes on the text. And another interesting thing are the list items. So we no longer use nested list items in the model. We have pretty flat lists with attributes that handle the list indentation. Again, this is just to help us deal with nested structures. Okay, so the editing file takes care of almost the whole logic. I will go through each method on the next slides. So in the init method, we define the schema and converters and register the command. Of course, the code will go later. The command itself will insert those two already mentioned model elements, two columns and column, on the current selection if it's allowed by schema. So here we have also the refresh method of the command to make sure that, for example, the state of the button will reflect whether it's possible to inject particular element in the editor or not. So a little bit about this magic word schema. Schema defines rules for the CKEditor engine on how to process the model. For example, where elements can be placed, what attributes are allowed in elements, it will be used during editing, when pasting content, and so on. It's a little bit complex to understand, but it's where the power of CKEditor is. And again, if you were not using general HTML support in your project, let's say somewhere without using Drupal, just be aware that only known elements and attributes will be retained by CKEditor 5. So speaking about schema, we will tell the editor to allow two columns element everywhere where block elements are allowed. And we tell that the column is only allowed inside two columns container. And now we define converters, so another complex word. So going through this super quickly, in CKEditor 5 there are two different conversions, model to view, which we call downcast. And for example, if you call getData to get HTML from CKEditor, the data conversion happens. So when CKEditor renders the model in the WYSIWYG area, it frequently does the conversion into the editing view whenever the model changes, more or less. And the upcast conversion, so the opposite to the previous one, upcast conversion, on the other hand, happens, for example, when you paste content into CKEditor. CKEditor gets HTML and transforms it internally into the model. Also, the downcast conversion simply happens when you start CKEditor with HTML. So we define some upcast and downcast converters for the main two columns converters using our conversion API. I won't spend too much time explaining this, but you can check out the extensive documentation if you want to know more. Again, the goal is to guide CKEditor 5 how to convert HTML to the model and vice versa. And we do the same for the column element as well. So once we have this module completed, we can go to the module screen, find this module and simply enable it. Remember also to adjust the format configuration, text format configuration, to add the new toolbar button. And if everything went well, you should see a new button in the toolbar, and you should be able to insert this two columns layout. So for the better developer experience, we created a dedicated developer tool called CKEditor 5 Inspector. This is the thing that you see at the bottom. It basically lets you inspect the model, the view, selection, markers, and basically everything that will help you to build your plugins. You can check our documentation for more info. I believe there's also CKEditor 5 dev module that ships that functionality too. You can also attach this CKEditor 5 inspector simply using bookmark it. It's explained in the documentation. So using a bookmark in the browser, you can inject CKEditor 5 dev inspector anywhere you like. Okay, so that's almost it. But I wanted to mention at the end that there are 2 additional sessions about CKEditor 5. Tomorrow, Laurie will make an even deeper dive into CKEditor 5. So check it out. And on Thursday, anyone willing to work on things related to CKEditor 5 may come to our dedicated session where help will be available. We will have also some CKEditor 5 core team members available online to help. So there will be me, Kacper, Laurie, and lots of folks online willing to help you. I wanted to say at the end that we also have a booth during this conference, so please feel free to drop by. We would love to hear your feedback about CKEditor. Believe me or not, but what we will develop next depends on you, CKEditor users. We basically have really feedback-driven development, so feel free to come to us and say what you would like to see next, and give some context. What's your application? What you're trying to achieve? Because sometimes it's that we can figure out a different way to solve your problem. So that's also important. Also, please feel free to drop by if you are interested in some of those premium features that we showcased. Yeah, so that's all I have for today. I hope you liked it and you will give it CKEditor 5 a try. Yeah, if you would like to chat about CKEditor or anything else, I'm here until Thursday as well. So thank you. Yeah, so the hardest part, questions, if you have any. If you have time, I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, could you maybe elaborate a little bit like on the revisioning system, like how the persistence work and?
So basically, it depends on whether it's together with real-time collaboration or non-real-time collaboration. Let me explain how it works with non-real-time collaboration. Basically, the module that we ship, this CKEditor 5 premium features, comes with adapters. So we save those revisions in Drupal database. It's not using internally the Drupal revisioning system because we didn't want to break Drupal, let's say, by adding our own enhancements. So we save it in as a different entity in Drupal database. Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. You showed us the image handling system inside CKEditor 5. Does it play well with the core media module and with other kind of medias?
I think so, because I was trying it out and it worked well. Basically, the core Drupal team was working heavily on that. And I think that it has much nicer experience than it had before with CKEditor 4. So yeah, according to my knowledge, it works well.
Okay, last one. Right.
Hi, thank you for a good presentation. How would you use that in a decoupled scenario? Could you maybe, render the model differently as GraphQL or something like that?
You mean decoupled headless version of the
Yes.
editor? So basically, yes, it's like the code is super decoupled. We have customers that use CKEditor this way. For example, I don't know if you're familiar with Zendesk support. It's quite a popular ticketing system. They're using CKEditor 5. You wouldn't notice that because they are using their own UI simply. They used CKEditor 5 engine. So it's CKEditor 5 is super flexible. So you can replace the UI, write your own UI in React or whatever, and use just the editing engine. And the same with how CKEditor 5 operates on the data. So just like I said, you can force CKEditor 5 to return anything else than HTML. It's up to you. We actually had a prototype even of returning JSON. Piotrek, who's here, was actually doing that for NEOS CMS. We didn't pursue that idea yet, but this is something that we have in our minds to have this kind of proposal next to CKEditor 5. So we're not going to replace our default proposal of CKEditor 5. We just would like to propose something also different. I watched a part of the presentation that was here before about Layout Builder, and I would love to provide some more sophisticated features in CKEditor 5 to make it possible also in CKEditor 5 in some way, magical way. But I would also like you, if you are interested in that kind of functionality, to come to our booth and tell us how you envision this kind of editing experience. Okay,
That's it.
okay. Thank you, everyone.